Oh, sorry. Is that me? Sorry. I didn't understand. That's like the top. Okay. All right. Here we go. Welcome to Create. Burp. Nailed it.
Monotype.
Welcome to Creative Characters from Monotype, a show where we meet the people working at the intersection of type and everyday life. I'm your host, Doug Wilson, and I'm excited to be here today with Cadley.
Hi, Doug.
Hey, Cadley, how are you?
I'm excited to be here with you in sunny Denver and for you to host your first episode on Creative Characters.
Very excited that a couple of Denverites get to host the show for the day. That's very exciting to me.
Yes. So today we have Petra Dočekalová on the show. Could you tell me a little bit more about her and what made you want to bring her on?
Yeah, absolutely. Petra is a really, really talented kind of multi-hyphenate designer, educator, calligrapher, sign writer that I met back in 2019 at TypeCon in Minneapolis. She was giving a presentation about Yaroslav Benda, which you'll hear in the interview. And she was trying to educate people about Benda and raise the awareness for a book that they were publishing about Benda. And so I met her there at TypeCon. We just happened to get lunch together with some other people, and I sat next to her. And she was so kind and lovely, as again, you'll hear in the podcast. So I just thought she'd be the perfect first guest for me for the podcast.
The book about Benda sounds pretty interesting. The way she described him as a maniac, I think was really...
Yeah, I think that's the fascinating thing. I mean, I didn't know about Benda before the book came out, but I've read the book since. And what's fascinating about him is that it's not just that he did typography or calligraphy. I mean, that's literally, I think she said something like, that's just 1/12 of the piece of the pie of what he actually did. He seemed just like an amazing artist that did all sorts of things. And because I'm American, I had never heard of him before. And so the book was a really great introduction to his work, but also to part of graphic design history and type design that I had never learned before.
Can you tell us a little bit about like his style, I guess, if there's a way to sum up like his visual style?
Yeah, so Yaroslav Benda, the best way I can describe him is he is such a Czech designer. He has this kind of Eastern European style that, as I learned in the book, is a bit more of a historical Czechoslovakian style of writing and type design and logo work. And I mean, geez, he made flags for the state of Czechoslovakia. And I started wanting to talk with Petra about the book, but then of course I wanted to talk about other things that she does. She's an amazing calligrapher, and she does this really amazing style of lettering, which you can see on her Instagram and on her website. And so we also talked a lot about that, but she's, as I said, she's a multi-hyphenate. So she teaches workshops in lettering, she does type design. And so I just was impressed with her body of work, but also just her personality.
Well, I'll hand it over to you and Petra for today's episode, and thanks for hosting.
Today, Petra Dočekalová is joining me from the Czech Republic, and I'm so excited that you are here today. Thank you so much, Petra.
Hello, Doug. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so honored, and ahoy!
Ahoy. I love it. Did you know that ahoy was the preferred greeting by Alexander Graham Bell when he invented the telephone? I think he really liked the sea and the ocean. And so he wanted, instead of saying hello when you answer the telephone, he wanted ahoy to be the answer, which I'm very disappointed did not happen.
Ahoy is the pirate tschüss or servus or guten Tag. So we Czech really like ahoy, and it's almost every day you can say plenty of those. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. I think I'd like to start out with first time you and I met, which was back in 2019 at TypeCon. You were at that time promoting and talking about the Benda book, and I'd love to just kind of start there. I just remember being impressed by the amount of research you and fellow designers had done. And so I guess my first question is, why did you feel it was important to write a book about Benda?
Yeah, and I remember that TypeCon pretty well. I think it was in Minneapolis, and it was really nice one. We fly from Minneapolis then to Taipei in Tokyo, and with my colleagues we make like a tour around the globe to visit all the typographic conferences.
Wow. What a dream.
With Benda, we had enormous success, and I'm still thinking about it and remembering it because this was really important moment for this book to even be like made. Because without the American audience and with American supporters, we would never been able to run a successful Kickstarter campaign and to actually make this English version alive. Because I spent more than 7 years on creating this publication. And the key was to get this book into the hands of people who could be interested in the topic of a maniac who devoted himself to typography. And I must say that I became a huge fan of Benda, but not everybody could be. So my main goal was to create an audience of fans or admirers of Benda. And it happened in Minneapolis, and I'm still super thankful for it. It was great.
So how did your work on the book get started?
First, we started Benda really like in 2013 when I was working in my bachelor project. Tomáš Brosil, who was my main tutor at school, he suggested me to investigate deeply who this person is and what his artwork means and how large it is, because I just found some publications with beautiful letterings on it and I wanted to digitize it as a typeface, obviously, in a type design department. And as I dig in and as I found books in archives and in shops and on internet, I found out there is a personality whose work is just grand and I need to search even more. And I started to find little pieces of illustrations, of jewelry, of tapisseries. And I slowly started to panic that this huge, comprehensive, lifelong work cannot be put just in a brochure or just turned into a typeface. So I collected thousands of books and pieces, get together with my other friend, Radek Sidun, who is the designer of the book and also my colleague, and we somehow joined to create a book that could be really like a piece of cake, in the meaning like 1/12 of the cake that you can eat and digest and still feel well, will not show Benda's entire work, but only focus on typography. And I hope it succeeded.
So you earlier described Yaroslav Benda as a maniac. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, he was crazy. And from this point of view, he was a workaholic every day, every night. And even his grandson says of him, he was working while pissing. And based on the amount of work that we found, it's probably true. I'm still amazed how many logotypes and word marks he created, how many illustrations and pictures of animals he did, how many books he designed. He lived for 88 years, which is quite a long time. And he was pretty active during the entire time. He worked till his last days. It's like 68 years of active career, which is amazing.
Wow.
And he passed through various decades and styles. His work changed based on these styles. So he was not active only in a specific period, but he was passing through those periods like a chameleon. And he could always change it to his own subject and his own manuscript. And if I'm saying maniac, he was really complex person who knew plenty of people from different and various fields like doctors and soap opera singers and actors and theologians and other people. And he was doing very good among them. So I would say he was a vivid, very bright character who knew plenty of people, who worked very well and a lot, and to spend entire lifetime on devotion to create a best typeface for a newly created nation is just a big devotion that you must have, and also you need to be a very focused person, and that's what describes a maniac, I would say, in a way.
Yeah. So how did you and Radek, as young designers, convince people to be interested in this mid-20th century designer and artist from Czechoslovakia? How did you translate that into a wider audience?
Oh, I would say that we are not trying to convince everybody in liking Benda, but Radek and we are really interested in Benda ourselves. And I would say that this fascination of completely weird letter shapes and kind of ugliness in his typefaces is so striking to us, and to me especially, that we were in a shock of working with material that is not beautiful at the first sight. This is not a work by Ladislav Sutnar, who everybody loves and who everybody respects and want to recreate or reuse. Benda was also not Wojciech Preisig or Oldřich Menhardt, who were both brilliant designers, and Menhardt calligrapher. And their work is not like Edward Johnston's or any other superstar. Benda is unique in how his work looks. And as much as we started to become more fascinated by himself, Radek and I, and we tried to find how to even cope with this work, how to, as a graphic designers, how to put all these various things together into one publication, that this big question mark among us just was in the minds of everybody else's who were looking at Benda's work. And as I always say, when I look at the Benda's typefaces, I see unfinished shapes, unfinished curves. And it's really triggering me into recreating it better, or take an inspiration from this G and create a new typeface based on this G, just different. So I would say in this way, Benda is influencer or inspirational source who can actually trigger your fantasy. So Benda in me is like a fire that could grow into any direction. Just recently, I was looking for a word mark based on a fish symbol, and I searched throughout the book every animal he ever created, and I just were fascinated by how many animals he illustrated. As illustrator myself or lettering artist, I'm just stunned about the overall quality. It was amazing.
Reading the Benda book, I was so impressed by the absolute breadth of all the different things that he designed and how amazingly creative he must have been and how prolific he was. I think that's fascinating.
If I may add, to be also a critic, which I love to be, especially to my own work. Why Benda should be in interest of anybody because he's so old and archaic and retrospective. It triggered us that he was forgotten for such a long time, and that I was the first who started to dig into archives and discover his work. But it's also one of the part that his ugliness might be the issue why he was not in the trendy modern movement that was leading in Czechoslovakia in that period of time. Because there was two waves, the modern typography led by Karel Tajge and other designers, and Yaroslav Benda was one of the designers who were more in common with František Kysela and Václav Hugo Brunner and other Czech designers who were more creating a national symbols and national style design, which were more archaic, oriented into Slavic history and into very traditional graphic design. And they were oriented into creating beautiful books. And in that period, by a young generation, it could be also viewed as boring, or just simply beige or gray or nothing that we can see the future in. So these two rivers that were following each other and running just by side, Benda was not the winner in this one. And when the communist and the political regime changed, he could be really fastly forgotten by the young generation and by the young energy that could really step on the highest pillars of our history. And Benda was not one of those. He was more like the silent servant to the country rather than the star that highlights the best in Czechoslovakia.
Oh, I like how you said that, the silent service to the state. So tell me a bit more about that political connection. Do you think that was part of why his work was forgotten or pushed aside, as you said?
It could be. Benda was never in a communist party. And after the Second World War, when the communists took the power and the propaganda won over the regime, Benda, among other artists, were removed from the school and they were forced to leave the university as teachers. And he was hiding and he was never mixing politics with art. So he was neutral in that way. And he was also very old at the time. He was already like 65 when he left the school. And he wanted to just live his last years of his life, and he didn't want to make enemies. And maybe because the switch of the politics regime could be one of the reasons his work just disappeared. And after the regime collapsed in 1989, and there was a revolution and establishing of a new country, Czech Republic and Slovakia, there were new trends, brand new, fresh, vivid graphic design, and nobody wanted to remember the past.
So you mentioned that Benda's work inspires and encourages you to create new things from what you see that he had created. Tell me more about that.
Wow, there is so many things. I must say that throughout the work, I really found like Benda myself. And I was really horrified, like if he would be a living person, he would probably stop me into creating this book. And he would like say, this is a horrible, horrible idea and horrible thing, stop it. And when I was writing the text into the publication, I kind of felt like I'm really understanding his thoughts, his ideas, and his style, why he designed it that way. And I started to look really deeply on his work and, for instance, take a big inspiration in his calligraphy practice, because he was a huge calligrapher and he also wrote many texts on school cursive handwriting. He prepared handouts for schools. And I started to learn his method and started to learn his shapes. And when we were, for instance, doing a presidential oath case with a presidential ceremonial address, I took Benda's manuscript and recreated it for the 21st century and transcribing Benda's work into mine. And I would say in Benda's many designs are solutions for today that are very beautiful and could be used again. But you need to be really careful and you need to look at it a long time to visualize it perfectly.
Hey there, real quick listeners. We are hard at work on a new mini-series aimed at demystifying the challenging corners of type and branding. We're calling it Behind the Font, and we need your help to make it happen. The first topic we're going to dive into is font licensing. Yes, the dreaded subject. But we want to hear your questions. So ask us anything on this topic, and we'll try to answer it on the podcast. You can send your questions in an email to podcast@monotype.com or message us on social. And if you're feeling super ambitious, record a voice memo on your phone and email it to us. We might even feature your voice on an upcoming episode. So keep your ears out for this new series coming later this spring.
Let's switch gears here a little bit. Petra, how do you introduce yourself? What do you do? I feel that there are so many different things that you do.
So first I say, hello, I'm Petra.
That's a good place to start.
I would say that I'm a letterer and typographer, maybe. A sign painter. I used to be a sign painter, now a sign writer or calligrapher. But basically what I do and we do in our studio is that we love typefaces. And Czech Republic is so small that when you want to really get focused and get deep into this profession, you need to cover multiple design fields. So you just don't do font engineering. You must also write books, you must do huge research, you must kind of touch calligraphy. And in my case, I completely fell in love with handwriting. So it's my direction that I would like to follow in the future years. And also you need to create typefaces and create it for others as commissions or just help them into like teaching and student stuff. But also you need to do plenty of other boring jobs. So I would say it's not like that every day I come into office and just digitize scarves. It's more like I write texts and interviews and really try to catalogize our book collection and library and do all the plenty minor things that are not important.
Tell me a little bit about your lettering. I think part of what attracts me to your work is you seem to have a very distinct lettering style that impresses me and I think is very beautiful and very distinct. I feel that I can look at your lettering work and it looks like from you and from your hand. Tell me how you got into lettering and why you continue to do it.
Thank you. This is a good question, but anytime I answer it, I feel like it happened a decade ago. Kids in the prehistoric era. I was too old. It's more like 10 years now. But in 2016, I was doing a master at Umprum Academy in Prague in type design and typography studio under Tomáš Brousil, Radek Sidun, and Karel Halon. And after plenty years in the studio, when I was more like a font engineer working for Briefcase and working for my other classmates and helping them run their own type foundry, I kind of feel like I am bored of grotesques and I am bored of simple sans serif and I'm bored of antiquas, and I digitized various Czech typefaces that were wild for TypeCon 9010 project. And I was like, I need to find what really triggers me on and what's my passion. And I started to collect a calligraphy book of Czechoslovak sign painting and handwriting and manuscripts. And I slowly started to understand that what is my passion is the curves, is the body of the glyphs, is the shape, and is the energy that actually moves these glyphs forward. So I started to really macro look on all the glyphs and started to write. And in a year for my master work, I tried to learn all of the various scripts that we got in our tradition and in history. And I tried to really turn from my lazy hand into calligraphic magnificence. And I really write several hours a day to really discover if there are new shapes that could be developed and discovered. And I really loved it. So the final master project was redesigning of old Czechoslovak manuscripts into contemporary usable scripts that could be created with modern tools like graffiti markers or brushes that are available in every stationery store, and that it's not like nipped in black inks. And I started to write in cafes and gain practice in the real places. And it showed me how I need to move more my handwriting and manuscripts. So I started to write bigger, much bigger, on murals and on posters. As I started to digitize these letterings into lettering typefaces and worked into really small scale. And this was going on for 8 years. So now I've got my eye trained into super high precision that I can distinguish if this stroke is well balanced or not. I'm not always saying positive words on myself, but I really must be proud of my eyes after those long years behind computer and behind keyboard.
Absolutely.
So lettering and calligraphy is as every other sport. You can practice and gain better, and you can train your hand, but you must train your eye to feel the balance and to feel the very fragile anatomy behind the glyphs. And once you feel it, you cannot unsee it, and you follow it as a rule for every other typeface. So I slowly started to design my very own first typefaces based on calligraphy and scripts. And I'm working on them right now and planning to release them hopefully soon, because that is something that really motivates me to find completely new visual shapes and methods of writing. I'm also, when I'm handwriting, I'm not now satisfied with just plain beautiful handwriting. I want to put a lot of masculinity into it, a lot of power, a lot of pressure, and a lot of emotions. And all my scripts should look like an emotion that you would like to enhance or showcase by using these typefaces or these letterings. And the connection with the atmosphere and the emotions behind lettering, this is something undiscovered for me still, and a playground that I could enjoy for future years.
So the work that I've seen of yours most recently is that large-scale calligraphic lettering versus specifically type design. How do you think And is it possible to connect and make a typeface that still feels like your graphic large-scale lettering?
Yeah, it's very hard, but I believe it is possible. You need to, or I'm trying at least possible. I'm challenging with every script, challenging myself with some typographical issues that I would like to put into those font typefaces or script typefaces. For instance, every time script typefaces are connected, how you can connect them with no features, how you can connect them without any required ligatures that users need to turn on to work it well, and how you can put these dry strokes and trashy strokes into the small scale of glyphs. What's the balance between a nude, beautiful curve and a trashy end, and how to make this trashy end look really like a wet brush or a dry pencil, and how to make it really feels like something to like copy paste the atmosphere. And that's what I'm trying to do in my typefaces. And also maybe it won't be needed in a few years, but it's a playground for me to enhance the powers of hand in a computer. Sometimes to write a perfect lettering, it takes time and you need to repeat it 50 times. But in a computer, you can redo it in few goes and few note positions. So mixing a computer with analog techniques is a best combination. I always write typefaces by hand and catch the spirit in the real brush or real marker on the real structure like paper or sandpaper or every other paper. And then I would like to transfer it into the digital, but stay rough and stay truthful as much as possible, but make here the typographical rules that we are all used to, like great kerning, perfect spacing, beautiful notes at extreme positions, alignment zones, hinting maybe. So these are still things that as typographers we need, the quality typefaces with all the diacritics and stuff, but still they must look unfinished and just rough, yeah.
So tell me what it is about lettering that captures your soul.
Whoa, it's everything. Now it's everything. I would say it's just movement. For me, calligraphy is like movement of entire body, not just a control of fingers, but you need to move your wrist, your elbow, your shoulder, your body if you are making graffiti, for instance. You need to be complex in thinking, like scale, sizes, format, how to enlarge it, how to elongate it, how to make it bold enough to fit into the format, and always how to create the best shape possible without a mistake. And you always make a mistake, which makes it human looking. If you have a lettering without mistakes, it doesn't look like lettering. It looks like a robot made it, or it's just a beautiful typeface. But in lettering, all the tiny mistakes in shapes or just weird glyphs or errors. And that's a link also to the Benda. It feels human. It feels like it was made intentionally by someone who understands the very fragile balance. And Benda, when he was designing grotesque typefaces, for instance, he never achieved a perfect straight curve, like inline of the typeface. He always has this fragile, weird, wobbly outline of the glyphs. And first when I look at it, I was really pissed off. Like he couldn't draw it with a pencil and a ruler, or what was his problem? But then I find in one of his texts that these small mistakes are making it looking like a figure or a body, something that we feel natural about. And it's really true. I found much more interesting ellipses or just some Brussels shape geometry rather than a perfect circle, because you can take a look on it and every time see a new idea behind it. When you play with a script typeface and you write something with a marker and then you switch it and make it a variable font out of it, you are on a completely different sphere. So I really like how the technology opens our brains into real variability and into real flubber motion, I would say, like being very versatile. That will grow, and I hopefully will grow with it.
How do you think that lettering connects with type design?
Lettering and type design and calligraphy are, I would say, very much connected. And because of viewing fonts on screens and only seeing the perfect curves at extremes in super high contrasted antiquas in 0 points, we slowly forgot what was at the beginning of these typefaces, like the inscription on Roman Trajan column, where the stone carvers and the sign painter who actually wrote the glyph with the brush really needed to draw the shape with a human hand, and then the engraver cut the perfect, precise, narrow lines into the stone by him. And by the 2000 years of evolution, we just get used to that the straight lines are something natural in the typefaces and very easy to get. But at the beginning, the line was not straight at all. And there is a beautiful book by one typographer, I would say maybe Mike Mayer, but I need to really search deeply if it's him or not, who really took a pencil, sharp pencil, and tried to recreate all our famous typefaces in pencil and draw them. And it is possible really to draw Times New Roman on all Castellans and William Morris by hand, because they did it like that. And today's typographers started creating typefaces directly in glyphs without knowing any proportions or balance or just basic elements of knowledge how and why typefaces are shaped like they are. And I always tend to go back to the roots and go back to the basics, and with every project briefly, really briefly, go through the entire evolution of typefaces, because there was plenty of ideas that were not developed into the shapes that we are using today.
I know that you're very interested in educating and sharing knowledge. So what are some tips that you can share with someone that's newer to the industry, that's newer to what calligraphy or lettering, or maybe they're a graffiti artist? What are things that younger people can learn that you can share to get them further into whether it's lettering or type design?
Very beautiful question. Thank you. In my case, when I get to the type design and typography studio and I wanted to learn everything about typography, my first step was that I started to learn from others by inviting various professionals into our school and into Prague to give a talk. And I wanted to really meet those people in person. So I would totally encourage everybody to travel to the type conferences and places to meet your stars and the real professionals, because they could give you knowledge and informations that you really hardly seek into internet. It's much better to meet the person and chat with him about how typefaces are really done and how to create them. The second source is books. Without books, we are just searching on YouTube and internet for a few pictures, but we don't have overall picture. We need to read books again and really read not just from our nation or our location, but we need to go into interstate books and really read by foreigner artists and foreigner typographers. That's essential. We need to link more. So as a student, if you are a student, I would really suggest let your doors open, because you don't know if you're going to go into Tuscans, Egyptians, grotesque or antiquas, and there is plenty of other categories and book sources that you can do. Open your doors as wide as possible, because typography is such a unique field where you can discover undiscovered stuff. You can really go super deep on the tombstones into the history of nation that you don't even know existed. You can go into multilingual scripts and discover beautiful shapes that could be redone or reopened again. And you can also discover your own typeface shapes. So don't let yourself judged by your tutors and your classmates, but try to be completely open and just soak the informations in. And after a few years, you're gonna know exactly what you want to do and where to position yourself.
I love that. I love that idea of just open your doors wide and see where it goes. I think that's difficult. I remember when I was a student, like you said, I wanted to be as good as all the other work I saw in 1 month or 1 year. And I think that in between is always tough. You know, oh, I'm really attracted to this style or this thing, and I know I want to make it, but I'm not good enough yet to make it. And that in-between time is really tough. That in-between time makes you question everything. But it sounds like you really just encourage someone to continue to learn and to continue to absorb, and it takes time.
Yeah, it's like picking your right soulmate. Like if you are into blonde girls, you would never discover the brownies. And you could never be surprised by them. So really don't put yourself into any position before even knowing what typography can offer you. And some type students will turn into great type theoreticians because they cannot just do a good typeface, but they could write about it amazingly. Or some students can really do throughout typography lessons a great pictograms and turn out they are great graphic designers. Some students from the type design department even stop doing typefaces and all and open up a bookstore and starting to using typefaces by their classmates and peers. So it's always about your own unique way and not anybody else try to determine you what you should do. You should find your passion. And typography is also about this emotion. It's not only black and white field when you move nodes and try to fit everything on baseline. It is about stories, it is about archives, it is about transferring letters from material to a digital, maybe motion, digital sphere. And I really faced this in our latest briefcase project on Oldrich Menhardt, when we did something we called a digital archaeology and transferred Menhardt typefaces into new fonts that could be used today. Long story short, it is very hard. And it is very hard to put your ego aside and really follow the footsteps of the artist, how he would probably proceed it if he will be still alive today and having the tools we got. So this was a huge lesson that taught me a lot, and I would really suggest that every student could once in lifetime go through a historical revival to just discover a real potential of typefaces.
So this is a podcast and we're talking about a visual medium, right? We're talking about your work. We're talking about blonde versus brunettes. Can you describe to me your personal visual style?
Oh, my personal visual style is pure chaos. I love mix of textures and mix of patterns and blue colors, striking black shapes. I also like nudity in a way. I love to go to swimming pools and observe human bodies. Not like a voyeur or something.
Yeah, you're not a creeper.
I hope not, creeper, sorry people. Not taking any pictures or drawings, but I really like to finding new shapes, new outlines, just the new angles and motions. And if I find a good shape, I'm really trying to develop it more. So from every location I go, I bring plenty of brushes. My drawers are full of materials and I'm like a small stationery store. And I like to sit and just test the limits, test the shapes and test my own hand. And I think this is kind of meditation or maybe transferring myself to a completely different universe.
That's great. Why do you think cafes and other places are hiring you, paying you real money to give them signage that they could have gotten somewhere else cheaper, faster, quicker?
I would would say that the restaurants and bars and bistros and cafes overall still hire real people, real waiters, who need to every day paint a daily menu on some wall or a window or a board. And these waiters are not as trained as were our grandmas or generation of our grandmas who were taught handwriting in a school as obligatory course. So I would say that because the generation that we live in don't use hand as often, the spaces and places that still use handwriting because it's cheaper than print or faster than print are in a need of handwriting, and they just don't know how to do it themselves. So super luxurious restaurants in Czech Republic hires me to create a handwriting model for them based on their visual style they paid million for, and they want a cheap and very fast handwriting that I could teach their staff. So I'm in the model of inventor of the shapes they should write. And on my knees and shoulders is the burden of be as simple as possible so they can learn it without any problem. They can replicate it without any problem. The tools they are using are easy and simple to find and very, very cheap to buy. And these are the reasons why these small stores are still using handwriting. But what's happening in Prague now is that every board is replaced with a TV screen or with anything like that. And I would say in the future, only very small amount of shops and places will be still using handwriting. And the first idea of going into these cafes was to enhance the overall quality of the typefaces on the street. And I found it like disturbing to be in my own city and cannot read the menu boards. So my idea was just to enhance the visual smog or visual low quality on the streets by starting with the lowest brands or lowest places I could go. And then, of course, you grow and climb higher. So you start to work for identities of gas stations and stuff like that. And your lettering is much visible and it's completely different game. But what I really like is to always work with the lowest and with the hardest, because these changes could be the most visible.
So Petra, you're totally a teacher. You're teaching workshops. You're teaching cafe workers how to draw your style for their restaurant. Like, you wrote a book about the history of your own country.
No, that's a service.
Oh, I think teaching is such a broader term.
Yeah, of course it is. But teacher must be very patient, and I'm not patient. Sometimes I still need to learn it. At this time, I want to still learn a lot. There's a lot to learn.
I think that's important. I think the minute you stop learning is the minute that you become quite boring and become quite uninteresting.
Yeah. And you go backwards and you start to steal from yourself and you just make a mistake over a mistake. So the constant movement, even though it's sometimes backwards, is getting you into the right direction. And it's my actually horror to get stuck on one place. And sometimes it's very nice to get calm and concentrated and very focused on just one job. But you cannot keep there forever. You need to move, yeah.
Yeah.
This is now like a philosophical hour.
I love it. It's great. I think that's what's so fun about lettering and typography is like, yeah, it's just some shapes, but like, no, there is so much more behind it. And that's why I like talking to people who are as talented as you.
Oh, I'm blushing. If you don't see it, I'm blushing.
That's great. Always in an interview, my last question is always the same. And it's, what questions did I not ask that you wanted to talk about?
Thousands. You need to come to Prague and we will cheer some beer and have some beautiful fried cheese and other.
You're speaking my language. Are there any, what's a single question that I didn't ask?
Honestly, yeah, I could speak about typography for ages. There is so many topics that I would like to open and discover and have another opinion on. When I started to study typography, Czech Republic had only 3 or 4 running type foundries. And compared to Germany or America, we were a very young country and only a few big typographers were sitting on the chairs and teaching it to others. And just 10-15 years was enough to start multi-type foundries in Prague. And many of my classmates and huge friends and close friends are running their own independent business. And it's very nice to observe it as a competitor, as a friend who supports them, as someone who is in the same field, but doing completely different aspect, the lettering, because nobody of my friends is doing lettering as I do. And it's kind of sad, and it kind of makes me feel like Benda, like a weirdo. Like, am I the only one using hand and you are all doing grotesques and selling for thousands? Am I the one only weird? Or what will be trendy in 20 years? And do we always need to work on trends, or should we move the boundaries of the field forward at any cost, even though we are making worst sellers? But we feel that it's essential for the field. There's plenty of questions that I like to talk about by beer.
Absolutely. Well, I hope to get to Prague. Absolutely. It's a city that I've always wanted to visit. So let's set a future date for beer and fried cheese and hype.
Yeah, or if it won't be in Prague, I'm coming to the next TypeCon, so hopefully make it there.
Wonderful. Tell me where people can learn more about your work.
So I'm having a website, www.petra-d.com. And very, very, very soon, I'm working on rebranding and starting to run completely new things there, making like my blog, my gallery of works, my own portfolio, because Instagram is now my only platform where you can search for new works. And I'm horrible at social media and terrible in posting news. So I really think that this website will be a new show-off of my newest projects. And I really hope that it will be successful to implement some typefaces there and release few script fonts in a nearby future. So hopefully this year you can see some new typefaces.
That's great. So petra-d.com. And Petra, tell me where other people can find out more, specifically about the Benda book.
So Benda used to have its own website, but it's not running anymore. So if you Google the Kickstarter and just type Yaroslav Benda, you can see the entire campaign with the video and with the history and with all the reasons why we put this publication into life. You can also order the book via the link that is still there, or you can just directly contact me. We've got still like 150 copies of the English edition, so I would be happy to sell it or send it for review.
Well, Petra, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your insights.
Thank you very much, Doc, for all those questions. Thanks so much for inviting me. Ahoj.
Thanks for listening to this episode. We love all the support we get from you, our listeners. As always, look for a link to our blog post in the show notes and check out monotype.com/podcast to read about prior guests. If you've been enjoying our podcast, please go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify to rate and review. It really does make a difference. And if you want, please subscribe to the show and share us with your friends. Creative Characters is brought to you by Monotype. It's produced by Christopher Olin and Mia Sullivan. We'll be back with more episodes soon. Take care.